Every single behavior we do in life is either to seek pleasure or avoid pain.
Yeah.
Everything and anything in life,
Mm-hmm.
at the most simplest of levels. And that's the same decision making the family is also going under, is to seek pleasure, avoid pain while dealing with their loved one that may be the identified patient. And it's just what science has told us over the years, I think, has validated a lot of what some of us who've been in the field for a while
Right.
learned back in the day. It's an insidious disease that's complex, but it's treatable. And it's just getting folks access and integrated into the right treatments to make that recovery and healing process.
Hello, I am B. Reeves with New Waters Recovery in Raleigh, North Carolina. Welcome to our weekly podcast, Finding New Waters. Our goal in creating Finding New Waters is to provide a resource for families to help navigate the complexities of supporting a loved one struggling with substance use or mental health. When we find ourselves in crisis due to one of these issues, most people have no idea where to turn. We hope to shed some light onto what is often the darkest hour for many families. Thank you. All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Finding New Waters, our podcast here at New Waters Recovery. And we're very lucky today to have a good friend of the program and a great guy, Jonas Coatsworth, who is the CEO and Chief Clinical Officer at Hammocks on the Edisto, an all-female treatment center down in Jacksonboro, South Carolina, right outside Charleston. Did I get that right, Jonas?
You got it, B. Pretty much not too far out of Charleston there, but yes, I guess that's a mouthful.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being here. We love you and we love Hammocks. And so, and also I'm sitting here with our CEO, Justin McClendon, at New Waters Recovery. And we're just happy to have you. So, first of all, is everybody safe down in your area?
Yeah, for the most part, thanks for asking too. And it's, and thanks for inviting me on this too. I've seen these quite a bit online. And so I appreciate the opportunity to hang out with y'all for a little while this morning. But, everything's fine here. It's being in Charleston. Fortunately and unfortunately, we go through a lot of these, but you just seem to never know what to expect. And I know other people had it a lot worse than us this time around, but it's it's quite sad to see some of the employees we have and other facilities and programs we work with, how they're affected by this. But all in all, we fared well.
Good.
It's good to
It's
hear.
always tough for so many reasons, but especially in our field where we have these people who are, in those super early days of recovery, they finally get to a treatment center and then something happens where they sort of have a real excuse to leave, and to not keep it going,
I think that's probably the one thing that's on the forefront of my mind, no matter if it's a hurricane or if it was a flooding incident like we had, is just the impact on someone's treatment and or recovery process while they're here. I mean, because I've always looked at it that it's a privilege for us to treat the women that come into us and their families and trust us with their care here. And so when something that's that drastic, or if it's environmental, we take it very seriously, and preventing those early discharges for things that are extremely valid a lot of times is an art to get people to see the bigger picture and work through the temporary challenges that are quite significant sometimes early in the process.
Yeah. Jonas, since we're on that subject, can you tell us a little bit about Hammocks and what it is that you guys do there? I mean, we know very well, but for the audience, right?
Yeah. So very fortunate to be a part of this project. I've been in the addiction industry for going on, I guess, 27 years. This coming March will be 27 years I've been doing this. Doesn't quite feel like it, but in some ways it does. But Hammocks is quite unique. I know for me, there's just a lot with having a gender-specific women's-only facility. First off, being operated by a male, which I know, folks that know me, but folks that didn't, that was a little bit of a explanation process early on. But what we do here is incredibly women centric and family centric on what we provide the women and their families here. And so the goal opening this was we had three owners, not part of a larger, corporate, conglomerate or just we are a privately owned facility. And the goal was to provide the most intensive and the highest quality treatment for women in a intimate setting that allows them to address those underlying issues for substance use. And so we incorporate a lot of heavy holistic practices from yoga and meditation and equine and surfing and pound fit to our evidence-based treatments. So we have 4 full-time therapists for 15 patients. So it's an incredibly low caseload for our therapists, and it allows them to really focus intensely with their caseloads on their trauma work and their addiction work while they're here. And so that's the design, is to provide the highest level of care for women, and grateful for the ownership group that we have to make that happen for the women that come to us from all across the country.
Where do most of your patients come from?
Seems like it varies. I could probably look at every quarter and it just throws it off. Sometimes we'll have, 2 or 3 folks out of 15 from the Charleston area, and the other 12 are from the Southeast and Midwest. And sometimes it feels like I have 12 people from 5 miles of each other in Mount Pleasant, or the Charleston area. It just kind of waxes and wanes, kind of however it goes.
Well, the good thing about where you are is you're close to Charleston, but it's in a very beautiful, low country, remote area where somebody's not going to be like, "Hey, I'm a mile from home," even though they're only probably about 15 miles from home from Charleston. But it seems like just another galaxy, basically.
Yeah, completely.
In a good way.
Yeah, it's completely removed. And so for me, I know for some folks, that's kind of the needed the first step. They needed to eliminate the distractions, which is the purpose of a 30-day residential program. Even though we do have some folks that do stay longer than that, but for the most part, women are here 30 days and they need that separation so they can really start to focus on themselves, realize where their 2 feet are planted. And when they get out to this setting, especially for people that aren't familiar with the Low Country, it is quite eye-opening, just the amount of nature and how quiet it is. Sitting on our porches or in our boathouse or dock, it's quite restorative in a spiritual sense, but also I think just people finding that center and calming core.
Sure. Jonas, you mentioned, kind of getting away for 30 days and things like that. And it just made me think about, so we also at New Waters feel very passionately about, connecting the person, especially if they come in for a period of stabilization, like, working with them to find what's going to be the next best level of care. And we're very passionate about those individuals that really need, a 30-day or sometimes even a little bit longer period to kind of, be free of distractions and center themselves and really invest in that early period of like learning what it's going to take to be sober long term and to make those long term changes. But just also curious for you, like, why do you feel like that's important? I guess is the short question.
Yeah, I think matching someone to the appropriate level of care or treatment is huge. There's not what we commonly say in this field, a one size fits all. Some folks have enough recovery capital where they don't need a 30-day residential program and they can go right into an intensive outpatient or partial hospitalization program. I know for us, the women that tend to really thrive here typically have a lot of domestic issues going on, either with their children or a spouse or even parents. A lot of times, we do have a lot of professional women in here, and there's a lot of things with balancing the professional career with the home life and the coping that comes along with substance use to manage those feelings. And so for me, this level of care is greatly needed for women or just people coming out of a detox, kind of like at New Waters, for folks that do not have that level of stability or support or what I like to call recovery capital at home to be successful.
I completely agree. And something we see a lot, and I was just talking to a family friend about this yesterday who's got a family member with us now, and going to detox, especially a place like New Waters where we do it's just people get more care than they're going to get at a typical detox. It's an amazing program. I mean, I'm confident saying that, but the one thing it does sometimes is give people, and this can happen anywhere, but especially at New Waters, a false sense of security, and that person comes in broken, often in, active withdrawal and detoxing, especially if somebody's never been to treatment and the family's never been through this, but they come in, and I always warn them, when you talk to blank in 2 or 3 days, he's going to look better. He's going to sound better. He's going to be speaking a new language, and he's going to be a lot better than he was 3 days ago, but he's nowhere near being better. Mm-hmm. And so that's what happens, I think, sometimes is people, if we don't keep on that, that capitalizing on the recovery capital that's already there, people come out and they think that they're good to go. And, but they're not, they got this false sense of security where it's really dangerous, and that's why we, in most cases, recommend further treatment to a place like Hammocks. Not always, but almost always.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it can vary. And so for me, that's that flight into health. And I think that's just normal with anything and everything in life. When you take on a big change or make a big move, you feel like you're cured a lot sooner than what you really are. You see that a lot with addiction treatment. So I've worked in pretty much every level of care possible during my time in this industry. And, you see that here. I always say people's first week, they're getting acclimated, they're excited. By the end of the second week, they're really drilled down in their treatment plan and they're really doing some hard work and the folks are really digging in. And then by the end of the third week, everybody has that thought, oh, I could probably leave now. I've gotten everything I needed. And then usually there is a aha moment that can be pretty earth-shattering sometimes. And then for me, it's that healthy fear that people get about leaving a controlled setting like this and into their aftercare programming. And that's why kind of on the front end and back end, we deal with, obviously with you all, with New Waters quite a bit on the front end, because we do have the need for folks with medical stabilization and people that need further assessment. And they really, a lot of the women that come to us really our programming is so similar in kind of what is offered there. Mm-hmm. I think it's a good transition for women, for us coming from New Waters to us. But on the back end for aftercare, I can't tell you how essential that is. And that's not just aftercare for the patient and matching the appropriate treatment for them when they leave. It's matching the treatment for the family members too. Self-care for me is the first step of relapse, either for family members going back to behaviors and getting back into that enabling behavior. And then it's same thing with patients. Poor self-care is usually the first thing that starts to happen when that relapse process starts before use occurs.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, we completely agree with that. Jonas, what would you say, especially for the family member, right? What would you say is like the most crucial things for being able to support their self and I guess their loved one, right?
Yeah. So for me is don't ever give up hope. I kind of work with so many families, I think, just start to lose hope. Then they kind of get stuck into the kind of like doom scrolling, I guess, just everything is bad all the time, and it's really, we see it a lot when families, if they do happen to be a part of the process of coming in for an admission, you can just see that look of fear on their face dropping off their loved one, but that sense of relief when they're driving away. So I always say, don't ever give up hope. Don't underestimate the value of your self-care and the treatment that you need as 2 and 3. And that's why for like Hammocks, we start family program with everybody the first week they're here. We don't wait for like a family weekend or end a program. We start right away because they need resources too, because if the loved one leaves here and they don't have, and their family's still operating in that alarm crisis mode, is not going to be as helpful for the patient that just spent, a lot of time with us and put a lot of energy into Hammocks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
for sure.
Go
ahead. Sorry. Yeah. And as you were talking, it made me think about, just families as a system, right? And like, very similar to what you're saying, like if the family doesn't change essentially, right? Like, home keeps just chugging along like it has been and the client is spending, 30 days doing some good work, but then they just pop right back into the same environment. I mean, as we see, a lot of times that doesn't work out so well. And the deck is really stacked against them, I think, if that's the case. So Trying to,
Absolutely.
trying to get that system to change together, at least to start the momentum of making change, is crucially important. I'm sure you would agree with that as well.
100%. And it's, for me, even this past weekend, we had a family from another state. Their loved ones our family program is all remote because most folks do not live in the Charleston area all the time, or they come from other parts of the country. So we have a Saturday multi-family group. And so we had a family sent a nice little email to one of my therapists and CC'd me, just the value in hearing things that they've never understood or heard before about addiction and or recovery, but most importantly, it was hearing from other family members and that they weren't alone. And for me, that's really the kickoff point with instilling hope, either for the patient or for the family, that things can be different. You don't have to repeat the same cycles over and over again. And that's one thing we do with our family program. It's lifetime membership. As long as you have that Zoom link on Saturdays, you can come back every Saturday. If you just want to come in and say hello, or if you want to come in to provide an update, you're more than welcome to.
That's awesome.
That's amazing.
Trying to help families understand that their own recovery is not a punishment for something that their loved one did is so important. I mean, I know my own family their attitude was kind of, wait a minute, why do I have to go to an Al-Anon meeting or to any kind of therapy because of what B was doing?
Mm-hmm.
But then they understood, some families understood it more than my own maybe, but that this is actually a gift for the family too. Because I think the misconception is, number one, it's a punishment for the family who, didn't do anything wrong. Mm-hmm. It was all the loved one. And then number two, it's just for them to learn about, the excuse of the person in active addiction or alcoholism, but it's really their own form of recovery so they can heal as a family things are going to still happen, but they can get the same kind of relief that people in recovery from substances get as well, which is a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And that, like I said, that all starts with the belief that things can be different. And you see some families that, have been kind of roped into this cycle or pattern from adolescent years. And they've gone through, sometimes decades of functioning in a way that's become dysfunctional. But for them, it's about trying to maintain homeostasis. But from an outsider looking in, it's completely chaos.
Right.
And so
that's, well, just that whole addiction to chaos thing, it sounded so trite when I first started hearing that, but it's absolutely true. And I realized even when I had been sober a little while, that I was still addicted to this chaos because that was so normal, living in turmoil and arguing and, ignoring ex-girlfriends and, all this stuff, all these same patterns minus the substances was still there. Mm-hmm. But that was the familiar feeling, even though it wasn't a good feeling. It was the norm,
Absolutely. And that for me too, just one last thing here is kind of, the whole kind of detachment with love, getting into some kind of things I learned when I first started in this field. And, for families, that's tough to kind of learn that. And that's probably one of the initial things we try to work on folks with, is identifying the differences between helping versus enabling behaviors, but learning detachment with love, and getting into those Al-Anon meetings and counseling and therapy and other support groups, to realize that it's possible, and that chaos and getting on that other person's roller coaster does no good. But, you can't fix each other either. If you start fixing your family by fixing your own part of it.
You just made me think, and I'm going to butcher this, so I'll try not to, but a colleague, I think you got it too, but a colleague of ours here locally in the Raleigh area sent us a recent research study where they were looking at, not at the identified patient, but at the loved one. And we're doing fMRI images of the brain. And it's very interesting. And I'll just kind of give the short summary of it. Shocking how similar the function of the brain was for the loved one when compared to what we see in those same types of scans with the patient. And if you think about it, especially with prefrontal cortex, and that we're probably not making great decisions, things are impulsive, amygdala, hippocampus, it's just very interesting. We talk about this whole idea of being addicted to the chaos, or the idea that the identified patient is kind of the drug, if you will, for that for that person that struggles with the enmeshment, the codependency. But it's very, very cool to see like the brain imaging showing that like, hey, you guys are maybe struggling from like the same kind of stuff, but the focus of that or the source of that is just different, I guess, right?
Yeah, it's just amazing how complex, but how many threads exist in the brain and just how disease functions in the brain. You could
Yeah.
almost say the same thing with like process addictions when it comes gambling,
Yeah.
sexual addiction is just the same type of firing up in that brain. But to hear about family members, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that to me is like, that's not a surprise at all because for
No.
me, that whole pleasure center of the brain, I've always said, back when I was, more of a frontline therapist and an intensive outpatient programs, that every single behavior we do in life is either to seek pleasure or avoid pain.
Yeah.
Everything and anything in life,
Mm-hmm.
at the most simplest of levels. And that's the same decision making the family is also going under is to seek pleasure, avoid pain while dealing with their loved one that may be the identified patient. And it's just what science has told us over the years, I think has validated a lot of what some of us who've been in the field for a while
Right.
learned back in the day. It's just, it's an insidious disease, that's complex, but it's treatable. And it's just getting folks access and integrated into the right treatments to make that recovery and healing process successful.
Hey, you mentioned being on the front line. Will you kind of backtrack and just tell us a little bit about your trajectory, how you got to where you are?
Yeah. So, I guess if I'm going to be brutally honest, my first time around in school didn't work out too well for me.
I get it.
I was up in, Boone, North Carolina. And
Okay.
that didn't last too well, not too long. It was about 2 years, but I think I was probably in school for about a year. The last year I kind of was MIA. But once I kind of got some things situated in my life personally and went up to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, made a decision, moved down to Charleston in 1996. Kind of knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to work in the field of addictions. I've had, some issues and, family as well as a lot with friends. I've lost a lot of folks over the years as well too,
Mhm.
unfortunately. And it's just, for me, it was real, just something I was motivated to do back in the 1996 when I moved to Charleston. So I kind of took advantage of the opportunities that were around me at MUSC and going through College of Charleston and the Citadel for graduate school and just kind of jumped right into the industry. I was a frontline therapist. Well, I started off at MUSC doing essentially tech work, driving a van, picking people up. You learn a
Okay.
lot about that.
That's right.
I'm from waiting tables and working food and bev and making, a good amount of money every night. At that time, I think it was probably $9 an hour in the mid to late '90s, driving a van around, picking people up to bring them in for treatment. And then eventually started working on the units, started working in research. I got to meet a lot of great doctors at MUSC during my time there, people that were willing to share their expertise and what their backgrounds were. And I just took advantage of those opportunities. And eventually I worked for Charleston Center, which is part of the county government or part of the state DEOTA system here in South Carolina. A lot of Medicaid and indigent care, and thoroughly enjoyed that. Got into a lot of advocacy work at that time. Got into the opioid treatment program world as well during that time period. So I just kind of have, put my, I guess, spread my wings out kind of all over the place. And for me, the steady, consistent has been as I've been in the addiction treatment industry. And for me, it's the most rewarding population to work with. It's the most
Mhm.
challenging population. And for me, I just really enjoy the process, whether if it was working in outpatient or working in residential, enjoying the process that people go through to learn to change and live their lives. And so essentially for the last 3 years, been at Hammocks on the Edisto. We opened 3 years ago this past July. And so been very blessed to do what we do here, but I've pretty much done a lot of everything and anything between since then, So I never thought I would end up back in residential treatment though. I thought when I did that before, I'm like, I'm not having any part of that 24/7 kind of constant churn, kind of like detox.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have a constant churn up there. There's no off button with that building at nighttime. Um,
Right.
Same for here, but it's for me, I've really learned to embrace it over the last several years from a previous project I was involved with. And it was just, there's a lot of beauty in kind of being a provider that's kind of learned the administrative aspect of things over the last 15 to 17 years. But, my heart has always been as a therapist. I mean, I still find myself sometimes doing things I probably shouldn't spend my time doing, but meeting with patients, meeting with families. I'm really big on greeting and families, and also thanking them when they show up to pick up their loved ones. So for me, it's really personal kind of what I try to do for these folks, because I know how much of how important treatment is and how much this experience families look forward to, but also patients wanting to really take the next step with things. Hopefully I didn't get too off track there.
No, that's great.
No, that's
I'm
great.
just looking at Justin because I know he can relate to that, being a CEO and a therapist at the same time.
Yeah, a lot of similarities there for sure.
So you still do some of that frontline work at New Waters?
I do, and I would assume it probably looks very similar to you, Jonas. It's things come up, and maybe you just need to kind of get involved a little bit, and that's what we do.
I think that what makes great organizations, and I'm just going to brag on New Waters real quick, because we've dealt with I think dozens of people over the years that we've worked together. And it's just, the feedback that we get from residents up there, and just the quality of care they get there from medical and nursing, but also the case management and the counseling there and the resources there. I mean, it makes such an easy transition for folks from New Waters to Hammocks, and that's awesome. But organizationally,
we appreciate that.
I think that servant leadership that you probably engage in quite a bit. I mean, I know for me here, I had some housekeepers that weren't able to make it in due to the storms. We had no power and all that wonderful things going around the low country area here. And so for pretty much Friday, for about 6 hours, I was out in the yard cutting trees and making tree piles, raking leaves, and getting things prepared, because we have joint commission coming this week, Thursday and Friday. So I didn't want to get behind with our final touches this week.
Of course.
I hear you. You got to do what you got to do.
That's
Yes,
it, right? Yeah. Just got to get the job done.
I think, from, my experience working for not too many places, but in this field, having a CEO with as a clinician background, with a clinical background, I think is just the best possible scenario, to be honest, because you have the executive side, but then the part that just really is empathetic and knows the language and knows just how these clients think and operate. I mean, it's so important.
Mm-hmm. Well, Jonas,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, you're a great clinician. We love hammocks. And I was just going to say, listening to your story, we think you're amazing, and the field is better having you in it, I guess, right?
Well, I do my small part. So, for me, it's approaching every day is so different when you're dealing in this kind of industry with the patients on the front lines, all the way from an administration and just the constant challenges you have in making treatment accessible for folks and getting people to kind of see the light. You know how it is. A lot of people want treatment. A lot of times, a lot of families want treatment more than the person seeking treatment. And so for me, it's really just doing my part, and so, so I like to think we make an impact as a team here. But I think every little interaction and opportunity you have with a patient in the hallway, or if it's in our dining room, or if it's sitting out on the porch, or if they're out in the dock and they're fishing, for me, just any little opportunity to have those little contacts, you just never know how much that ripple makes with somebody. And so for me as a therapist, kind of being in this role, I think I'm probably hyper vigilant and attuned to that constant energy that's flowing through the building. Trust me, we have a lot of women that come here as I can't believe I'm walking into the doors with an all women's treatment center. We have a lot of people that seek us solely because of that. But for me, the synergy that happens with a small group of women together, because we typically, have 15 women here, it's just beautiful to watch and to be a part of that process. And for us to operate the way we do administratively and through my leadership team and through our clinical team and all our other frontline staff down to housekeepers and dietary, it's just beautiful to watch that build with every group and the ever-changing dynamic that's always evolving.
Yeah, and you just said something that made me think about a personal experience. When you're talking about having, the opportunities to go hang out with the women when they're fishing and just kind of just to have those little interactions. It's so important. It was for me when I was in a treatment center. Every day I was seeing my therapist. I knew who that was, and the other the people who were leading the bigger groups and small groups, and the RAs and the nurses and the psychiatrists. But then every now and then, when somebody kind of from the back office who was sort of dressed like we're all dressed today came and said something to me, that was just this personal touch that meant so much to me.
Yeah.
You know.
I think growing up in the food and beverage industry and hospitality and doing a lot of that work early in my career before I got into this career, I guess earlier in other work jobs. I mean, for me, I've always been conscientious of that, and some of that I think goes back to, kind of how I was raised with my mom, and dad, and just kind of what's important and how you communicate with people, and so that does go a long way. I appreciate you saying that, B, because I think that is. I don't think that happens necessarily in every environment. Some places are logically bigger, or they have hundreds of beds, or they have hundreds of staff members, and there's only so much that you can do. But being smaller has its advantages to provide that.
Absolutely.
Most definitely.
What kind of trends are you seeing with your patient population now in terms of substance of choice or co-occurring mental health conditions? Anything kind of popping out at you right now?
Oh yeah, it's been quite interesting. So I think the one thing I'm going to add real quick, we do every Friday here, which I think is really cool because the residents really they look forward to it. I think it's because it's a lot of other staff members they don't have contact with being a part of it. We do a staff resident volleyball game on our volleyball court every day.
Oh, cool.
If you want to see some of the most probably a lot of smack talk, but people who don't even consider themselves competitive, just watching that fire come out on them with the white poking and prodding, it's just beautiful to watch, and just seeing how excited people get doing things that they don't normally do and interacting with staff. Because I'm always out there on Fridays. For me, it's my highlight. It's a great way to close my Friday.
That's great.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but for as trends, kind of what I've seen of trends, I mean, I can tell you just really since school has started, because typically the one thing with women that I've learned in the 3 years being here, we don't follow a lot of the typical trends I've been used to in this industry. Typically spring break, when school's in and out, winter break, when school starts, when school ends, we see things that we track with a call volume. I think intensities of needs for people coming in change. I would say just our current population, really even since the last probably 4 to 6 weeks, has been some of the more acute co-occurring that we've had since we've been open.
Wow.
And typically I've always seen that over the summer, and I've seen it since school year started. We have a lot of, it's very interesting. Current population has a lot of severe depression, a lot of bipolar 2 right now, co-occurring with, mostly kind of alcohol and cocaine stimulants. So the trends that I've seen kind of with women is, for me, it's a ever ongoing lack of resources for women. I think women have so much of a different process and path than men do. There's a lot of barriers that women have coming into treatment. Usually, childcare is kind of put on their shoulders to manage the childcare aspects of things, and so you're managing that quite a bit. I think some other trends that you kind of see specifically since COVID is the higher prevalence of alcohol use disorder and the effect it's had, not just in percentages, but just even mortality rate with women. I mean, I think COVID changed a lot of things for a lot of different populations, not just women, but I think with women specifically, you've seen a spike in mortality from some of the articles that I've read just from alcohol use disorder, earlier onset severe liver disease, and then even too with pain management. Typically with women, you typically see, especially when because we usually have all 3 generations or 4 generations of women here. I mean, at any given time, I could have someone in their early 20s, all the way to the early 70s. I think my oldest right now is probably 72 years old with us, dealing with chronic pain, opioid use, alcohol use to manage that pain. Never really a substance use disorder history before the age of 55 at all. And it's just all later in life kind of setting in. And that's for me with women and being a single gender specific facility, those things are just a lot more prevalent with women coming in the door. And the more that we have been learned and been taught by patients coming in the door, and what the needs are, it's been very interesting to kind of see, some of the trends with the aging population, with the younger population being sicker than what I was accustomed to when I first got in this field. It's pretty sad to see.
Yeah,
it is.
Well, you had such kind words about when our New Waters clients get to you. And fortunately, we don't have a lot of clients who come from you to us, but I'm in the field all the time and I get nothing but positive feedback from the treatment centers who also work with you, but more importantly from clients and patients who have gone to you at Hammock. So y'all are doing great work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And definitely it's a lot of work to make this go around. And so for me, the relationships we have with folks outside of here go a long way to that. And I do believe we have a former mutual client of both of ours, who I think does some alumni work with you all. I think she's still doing quite well. And it's always a pleasure to hear her post on our app and give updates on her recovery experience. But she always mentions some of the alumni or some of the events that y'all have going on up there for your alumni, which I think alumni programming is huge for supporting
huge.
folks.
Yeah, she's one of the most amazing stories I've ever seen, ever. And when she came back with her year, that was some exciting stuff.
Yeah, and she was not 100% thrilled to be here. I mean, I don't think anybody ever comes to Hammocks 100% ready to go. There's always a percentage there, and for us, that's part of the journey is turning the extrinsic into intrinsic and finding those internal motivations. And she was one of them. You could see that evolution happen over the course of the month here, and by the time they were walking out the door and the involvement their spouse had with our program too, it was beautiful to watch.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I remember talking to her on the front end, and hopefully this will be a very positive way to wrap this up here. And husband really, was sort of pushing it, rightfully so. She was sort of dipping her toe in and saying, you know what? I want to come, but I need to go to my daughter's 21st birthday party. It was either that her birthday party or a graduation. And I just remember saying, what better gift than to go get help? And she did. She came in instead of going, and she's,
amazing.
Came to us, had a great experience with us, was very sick when she got there, went to Hammocks, and she's probably, 14, 15 months sober now. It's amazing.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, hey man, this has been awesome. Thank you so much. How do we, before we totally wrap up, how do we find you and find Hammocks?
As far as finding, I know this is recording, so Melanie kind of handles all that for me. So as far as handling this, so obviously website, www.hammocksrecovery.com. There's a chat on there. There's a phone. There's ways to contact with us pretty immediate. Everything we do to talk with prospective patients or prospective families that want to work with us, everything is done by in-house staff. Everything we do is kind of personalized touch. That's the best way to do that. We also have all the appropriate social media handles, which I will have our friend Melanie Knight kind of turn over to you, and that Perfect. She kind of manages all that. But yeah, we're here to help all the time. We pretty much take phone calls. I know this weekend was an incredibly busy weekend. I do think some of the events up in the upstate of South Carolina and the Southeast United States kind of relegated some folks to having to find other options. But I know this weekend was quite a busy weekend, but we're pretty much always there to help.
Awesome.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Jonas. We really appreciate you coming on.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Jonas.